Welcome, I'm Rogers Anderson, Williamson County's mayor, and as we travel around the county and talk to our different department and department heads today, we have the distinct honor of talking to a person that has just recently been promoted and confirmed by the County Commission, Nena Graham, with our budget department. Took over David Coleman. When David Coleman retired, Nena has worked there for many, many years, actually longer than David, and we welcome her aboard as the director and in charge of the budget and the finance department, all the accounting. Welcome aboard, Nena. We thank you for stepping up to the plate and accepting the challenge.
Thank you, Mayor. I'm glad to be here.
Oftentimes when we talk to our employees and our different guests that we have as we travel around Williamson County, we like to know a little bit about them. It would seem to me that with your red jacket on this morning, apparently you must be an Alabama fan. But going beyond that, tell us a little bit about Nena Graham and how you got to this point in your life.
Well, I'm originally from North Alabama. It's a small town there called Moulton. I usually tell people you're passing through there to go somewhere else. It's about 40 miles southwest of Huntsville. We came to this area, my husband and I, Thomas, around 22 years ago. Well, actually, today is my wedding anniversary.
Well, congratulations.
22 years, it is. And we came to this area. He works with a manufacturing company down in Spring Hill. So that's what brought us to this area. We originally moved to Franklin. It's a beautiful part of the county. We enjoy being in this area. And while we were here, I, of course, started looking for employment, and that led me to county government. Bill Giddens was the director at that time, and he hired me here 21 years ago. So that's kind of how I came to be working for the county.
Well, for the last several years, and I know there's a distinct difference between government accounting and government bookkeeping versus the private sector, but for the last several years, Mr. Coleman has been in that role. I think he had 17 years, if I remember correctly.
That's right.
And you've really been the person behind the scenes and oftentimes crunching all those numbers to make this budget process go smooth, and particularly the last 2 or 3 years, getting prepared for this particular time in your career that you could step up and to the plate and actually be the person, the director in charge. I happen to know for a fact that as the mayor, I may get the praise or the criticism for so many things that go on in Williamson County, but it's really your employees behind the scene, and I know you've had the opportunity to work with a variety of people over your 20+ years, but that's still true today.
It is, and we couldn't do what we do without our employees, our staff, working to help us get us those numbers. The accuracy and timeliness and everything comes from the whole group. It's not just one person. Sometimes you just see the one person out front, but it's an effort of the whole department that makes all of that work.
And your role as the director over purchasing and the budget, and we have different people that fit in each one of those categories, right. So it's not like you're sitting there changing hats all day long into this environment we live in, and certainly living and working in Williamson County may be a little bit different than some of the other cities and counties, but we are just now beginning to develop and coming out of a very difficult time for not only our nation, but for the local economy as well. And our budget is almost knocking on the doors of $400 million.
Yes.
A huge responsibility that I know you take very, very seriously, and the accuracy and the timeliness of those numbers. But kind of outlines some of the responsibilities that you and I guess it's easy for me to ask those questions because I don't have to know exactly where every little I is and every T that needs to be crossed, because I trust you and the people that we have. But when you talk about a $400 million budget, of course a large sum of that is the school side, but it's still an unbelievable responsibility that the people under your jurisdiction, the people that are falling under your command, have to take very seriously. So kind of touch on some of the different departments that you'll be overseeing.
Some of the departments that work directly in our area are purchasing, accounting, payroll, and inventory control. As you mentioned, the $397 million budget, $257 million of that is the schools. So all the county funds combined is right around $140 million, or a little over $140 million. So we have, our largest fund is the general fund, and that's the majority of the operations in your government. You have your accounting there, your codes, those type functions fall under that. We also have other elected offices that fall within the general fund. Then you have another fund, which is the highway fund, landfill fund. Those are all, when I say funds, they're all separate sets of books that we have to track. They all have their own budget that you have to go by, and we just take that on a daily basis and track those numbers as they come in.
Well, a lot of people watching this show may not realize we hear a parallel oftentimes about our family income, your personal income, you and your husband's income, that if you need a little extra money, that you can just take it from this pot over here. And government accounting standards are much different than that.
They are. We all have, there are laws that dictate to us what monies are put into each of those funds and how they may be spent. So if the general fund needs money, they can't go over to the highway fund, say, hey, you got this extra $1 million out there, we want to take it and use it for another purpose. Our laws dictate to us how the monies come in and how they can be spent.
Recently at one of the county commission meetings, we had 40+ resolutions, one of the largest nights we've had in a long, long time, going through a lot of what I call boilerplate county commission type resolutions, moving money, maybe money that you didn't spend last year that you're trying to get into this year's budget. And oftentimes that seems very mundane or even boring to the average person on the street, but there's a reason for that.
It is. A lot of those are grant funds, and a lot of our grant monies come from the state or federal government, and those funds run on their budget cycle, which is different from our budget cycle. So at the end of the year, those funds will close out into our fund balance, and then you have to bring any balances forward from those for the operations in the new budget.
Nena, for the last several years, as we've indicated earlier in our discussion, it's been a difficult time in Williamson County as far as starting new projects except for school side. We've pretty well parked all of the activity other than the ongoing maintenance and the ongoing programs that need to be fixed. Air condition breaks, you certainly got to fix it. Vehicle goes down, certainly got to fix it. But as we're beginning to see in 2012 some activity out in the community, more homes, for an example, more new starter homes starting, and there is a steady flow of income that's always going to be available to government to run its programs, we get about 50%. I'm gonna round things off. We get about 50% of our revenue from the state, and about 50% from property taxes, and I'm off 1 or 2%. We get 1% from the feds to run. Not a lot of money.
Right.
When I say, I've often said that if you're wanting to know how money is being spent, if you're wanting to know who the men and women are in the leadership position, you better know that local level, because you're only getting about 1% of the Fed money, and the rest of it's your taxpaying money and my taxpaying money in the state. But as we have developed that plan and tried to hold the line on so many things, purchasing and traveling, which you've been a huge part of, we still have one central obligation that we have to do, just like you do and I do. We have to pay a debt. Exactly. We have to pay our bills that we have accumulated over the last several years. And we hear these terms called debt service. We hear this buzzword oftentimes, well, it's rural debt or it's another type of debt. Kind of touch on that a little bit, and how and what we have to do to maintain that. And particularly probably touch on how when schools are built, who actually has to pay that and who has to account for that?
The laws that we operate under say that the government has to maintain all county debt. So that's schools, any type of other government buildings, everything has to be maintained under the general government. We have two funds that account for that. We have a general debt service fund and a rural debt service fund. The general debt is everything within the county. If you build the courthouse, parks and recreation, and it also has the high schools, because they fall within all areas of the county. So those type construction projects and the debt service, when you borrow funds to pay for those construction projects, the debt service that you have to pay back falls within the general fund. The rural debt service is for schools that are kindergarten through 8th grade, because those fall within the cities. So those are the two type debt service funds that we have.
And when you think about this county, the fastest growing county in the state of Tennessee, nearly 45% growth in the last 10 years. We know that we're in a growth mode, and we're also in a school building mode that once the county commission votes and gives the authority to the school board to go forth with a project, and the first project is always, or the first step of that project is always the purchases of a land, and then later on the building and eventually the opening of the schools. But all of that debt is that it's your responsibility to oversee that debt payment, regardless of what fund it is. It's a matter of semantics, but for you it's a matter of law that has to occur. So it's not as easy. A lot of people look at the debt of Williamson County, and that's certainly going across our nation, Washington and the state of Tennessee. Get your debt under control. Talk to us a little bit about our debt under control. And recently we were just provided by our bond counsel and our folks that we work with, Stevens Company, Bass, Berry and Sims. They gave us a debt book, and initially when you open that book up, it's a little scary.
It is. Well, what we did, I mean, we're constantly watching opportunities to save for the county. We work with our financial advisors and our bond counsel to look for opportunities for refunding of the debt. a lot of times you'll hear them talk about savings from the refunding of the debt. And you may hear, we'll save $2 million, $3 million. Well, that is a savings in your overall payment. It's not like you turn around and get $2 million to use elsewhere. It's just a reduction of your interest payment over time. It's simplifying it. It's like when you refinance the mortgage on your home. When you have a 5% interest rate and maybe want to go to a 3%. So you realize those savings over time and lower interest payments.
Over the last several years, and particularly let's say the last 10 or 15 years, all of our projects that I can think of and have been on 20-year notes, except for one period of time, about 2 or 3 years ago, I believe, we borrowed some money at 25 years under some what we call ARA funds.
Right, the Build America bonds.
Build America bonds. Thanks for helping me out with the verbiage there. But the majority of our debt has been, the vast majority of our debt has been on a 20-year notes. Right. It is nothing like you would think in the home mortgage world where you purchase a house for X amount of dollars and they divide that up by the number of payments for 20 or 25 or 30 years. We do a lot of creative debt calculations, if I can use that word, in the things that we would borrow. You would never want to borrow money to help pay for some smaller, deteriorable items that maybe only have a life of 7 to 10 years. So internally in that debt package, you'll structure the debt to pay for those items, that need to be financed in such a way as that it doesn't make sense to be buying a coffee cup for $2 and 20 years later that coffee cup costs $6 and it's wore out, oh by the way, in half of the distance. Why is that important? Well, it's very important to demonstrate that what you're really doing in financing is borrowing money for the things you need, but it's also paying for those things as the life of that goes on. But upcoming here in the next short month or so, you've gone in, along with your predecessor, and through our bond counsel and our financial advisors, and they said, well, there's some opportunities here to save. Let's talk about that a little bit.
We have done that. We're currently looking at it's 4 or 5 issues that will provide an opportunity for savings. It is a refunding, and it's just as I had explained earlier. It was issued at a certain interest rate. The market is telling us that we can borrow at a lower interest rate, which will provide a savings to the county. It's in the General Debt Service Fund and the Rural Debt Service Fund.
And again, I think it is important when we talk about these savings, they're just on future calculations.
Right.
Instead of paying $10, you might pay $8. But it is true savings on the books, for the books.
It is true savings in that when we go through the budget process, the savings will be reflected in your next year's budget. Say you have this year, if you have $30 million in debt, next year that may be down to $27 million. So that's where you'll realize your savings.
And part of ours, if we can illustrate this on television without the use of graphs, 2 or 3 years ago we opened 5 schools in 13 months, which is an enormous amount of activity for a county that was going through a very difficult time financially, but we were still experiencing that growth. And the county commission, who authorizes all purchases, it's not you and it's not me. Our job is to direct them and give them the good information, but ultimately that vote is based upon their pushing of the button, either yes or no. And if they push that button yes to open that school, then we have to finance that and we have to pay that back.
Right.
But over a period of time, particularly a couple of years ago, we did open 5 schools. And if you figure the average cost of an elementary school is around $25 million, a middle school is around $30 to $32 million, and a high school is getting close to $50 million,
Yeah,
45 to
very
50
close.
million, just depending on how much that land cost and through the bidding processes. There was an amount, a very large sum of money that had to be borrowed and had to be put on the books. Well, it's nothing different than you and I when we have our personal finances. If we make a lot of large purchases, in about 2 years or a year and a half down the road, we got to start paying that principal and interest. A little different than our homeowners. Homeowners, you close on your house and within 30, 45 days, the monthly payments need to be written. In government, you might get away 6 months, but you're still going to have to pay that principal. You're going to have to pay that interest within that first 12 months that you borrow the money, somewhere around in that area. So we've had a real spike, and that's what I'm getting to. You've seen a real spike on the charts that are presented to our county commission and to the general public. Plus, we also see the schools from time to time, they ask for some what we call anticipation dollars. Kind of touch on that a little bit. If you were looking at that graph, why that would spike up like that and why it's important to refinance when you possibly can.
Well, as you said, when you borrow funds, you have to pay them back. And when we structure our payment schedule, it does depend on if you had items that had a shorter lifespan than a building. So those type payback structures are where you have to monitor where you can get your savings. So those are the type items where you look back over the next 5-6 years, we've got a spike in there that's something we're going to have to manage. We have to look at our revenue sources and determine where they best fit to be able to pay back the debt.
I am very proud of what you and the team have done, David Coleman did, by helping us to secure and keep the Moody's AAA bond rating. Real feather in your hat. I've often explained that Williamson County is one of only 2 counties in the state of Tennessee, and Hamilton County came online just in the last couple of years with the ability to borrow money with a AAA bond rating. Maintaining a AAA bond rating may be the biggest challenge of government over the next few years. Talk to us a little bit about the AAA bond rating and the importance of that.
That rating is important because that dictates the amount of money you have to pay back, your interest cost. It's kind of like at home. If you have a good credit score, you're going to be able to borrow money at a lower rate. And that's what the AAA rating is. Once you get it, you don't always have it. Every time you have a refunding or a new debt issue, that's something that they evaluate for your county each time.
Well, we've got about 4 minutes left, and I do want to kind of get into Nena Graham personally and your philosophy of finance, because I guess my role as mayor, if you go to the books, you read it, I'm the keeper of the funds, which means I'm transferring that responsibility to you, that area, and the keeper of the property, they call it. But it's real important for the taxpayers and the folks watching this show to know that what Nena Graham's philosophy is on financing, which is a mirror of the mayor. So I would like for you to kind of talk to us a little bit about your philosophy on of accounting, and I know a lot of it is what the county commissioners do, but you're called upon at all different walks of life and different circles to give your opinion on something because you are managing almost $400 million, which is a monumental task in itself.
Well, I take a conservative approach to that. You analyze the needs of the county as a whole. We have 30-odd departments that fall under the mayor. So each of those have needs. The schools have needs. So you just take, you just have to analyze the needs of everyone as a whole.
When you're looking at a financial picture of Williamson County at, let's say, a 10,000-foot position and looking down, oftentimes we do budget on a conservative basis, even knowing at the end of the year that we know we're going to have some money coming back to us, but that doesn't necessarily mean anything other than we don't always know that the revenue is always going to come in. So, you know, we budget things at 92%, which is a safe, conservative way, but there's a tendency to always think whether you've always got 8% that you're going to have at the end of your budget cycle that you ought to be able to spend here and there, and that's not always the case, and in fact it's very seldom the case.
Right. Well, and that you have to allow for contingencies with that many departments and all the needs within the county. You never know what is going to come about that you may need extra funds. Natural disasters or anything could fall within that.
Well, in fact, we actually saw the minute we've got left, we actually saw that come into play over 2 years ago now with the May floods that came through, and last Monday night, or the last county commission meeting we had, we actually received some funds over 2 years ago back to the highway department, almost $1 million, 800 and some odd $1,000 that came back from the federal government reimbursing us for the work that we had done, for the effort that we'd put out to protect our citizens. Well, that was half of the payment. The first half came in a little bit earlier, but we had to wait well over a year to receive that, and that's important to have money in the bank.
That's a very good example of why you need those reserves out there.
Nena Graham's been our guest. You'll see her running around the campus here. We thank her for her effort. We are looking forward to working with you, and thank you again for stepping up and being our budget director for Williamson County.
Thank you for the opportunity.
Happy anniversary.
Thank you.
This is Roger Anderson. I'll see you around the county. Have a good day.